The knock came while Wolfe was explaining to me, again, why the world would end if I touched his orchids without supervision. "Pfui," he said, halfway through his sentence, when the second knock came, sharper and more insistent. I was already halfway to the door because Fritz had gone marketing. The sound echoed down the hall like somebody trying to kick their conscience through a wall. When I opened it, a man in a brown suit that didn't belong to him stood there, hat in one hand, an envelope in the other. The suit was too big and the hand too steady. "For Mr. Wolfe," he said. "Congratulations," I told him. "You've reached him. Give." He didn't. He glanced past me toward the sound of Wolfe grunting in the plant room. "I was told to deliver this myself." "Sure, step right in. The tiger hasn't eaten today." He hesitated just long enough for me to notice a band of damp on his collar. Rain, not sweat, but the eyes, gray and running on no sleep, were the giveaway. He wasn't a messenger. He was a man rehearsing innocence. Inside, Wolfe emerged from the plant rooms like a ship leaving harbor, towel across his hands. "What is this disturbance, Archie?" "Special delivery," I said. "The sender seems emotionally attached." The man took 2 steps forward, stopped at the edge of the Persian rug, and extended the envelope as if handing over a live fuse. "Sir, I was instructed, only to make sure you opened it yourself." "That instruction is impertinent," Wolfe told him, "but not uninteresting." He took it with 2 fingers, glanced at the seal, then set it on his desk blotter without opening it. "Your name?" "Ralph Kendon." "Profession?" "I used to be in freight." "Now, nothing much." His tone said he wanted it to stay that way. Wolfe studied him a full minute. The only movement in the room was the slow curl of smoke from Wolfe's cigar. "You were paid to bring this?" "Yes, sir, cash. From a man who didn't give a name. Just an address and a time." I said, "You take orders from ghosts often, Mr. Kendon." He turned his head toward me but didn't answer. The muscles under that loose suit bunched like cables. Wolfe sighed. "Archie." "Got it." I took the envelope, tore the flap, and slid out one sheet of paper. It was blank, except for a pressed violet glued dead center. Fritz's voice floated from the kitchen doorway. "Mr. Goodwin, the soup." "Hold it, Fritz." I turned the paper over. On the back, neat block letters spelled, "For the man who never leaves his house." That froze the air, tighter than Wolfe's thermostat. He leaned back, fingers steepled. A jest? Could be. Or an invitation. I touched the flower, dry, brittle, no scent left. Somebody's got taste for theatrics. Kendon swallowed. "That's all I know. I was told to drop it and go." "You may go now," Wolfe said. "Archie will note your address." When the door closed behind him, Wolfe spoke softly. "A violet, symbol of modesty. How droll." "Maybe somebody's modest about a murder," I said. He grunted. "Or about luring me outside." I tossed the envelope onto the desk blotter beside the unopened beer. "You planning to bite?" He stared at the violet as if it were a chess problem carved in flesh. "Archie, before we determine that, kindly telephone Inspector Kramer. Ask if anyone named Ralph Kendon has been recently freighted to the morgue," Wolfe said, and I was halfway to the phone before his voice stopped me. "Archie, one moment." He leaned forward, squinting at the violet still lying on the blotter. "Do not call yet." He lifted it delicately with the blade of his letter opener and sniffed. Not like a man smelling a flower, but like one measuring evidence. "Dried. Artificial. The color preserved with glycerin. Whoever prepared it meant permanence. Or they just had lousy taste in florists," I said. "Pfui. Do not interrupt my meditation. The glue is not commercial. It's casein, milk-based. Used in, what would you say, school projects. I'd say art class, if the killer's a teenager." He ignored that, which meant my hit rate was steady. You will now, Archie. Call Inspector Kramer. The line clicked once before Kramer's voice came on, hoarse and cranky as if it had been up late explaining to juries that fools exist. Kramer. Goodwin. I've got Wolfe beside me in full bloom. We've had a visitor who delivered an envelope from an anonymous admirer. Contents: one dried violet and a note that says, "For the man who never leaves his house." Ring any gongs down there? There was a long chew of silence that told me he was smoking a cigar he wasn't supposed to. You kidding me? Not unless Wolfe took up practical jokes. You get the name of the delivery boy? Ralph Kendon. Said he used to work freight. Brown suit, mid-40s, eyes like he saw something he shouldn't but signed the receipt anyway. Another chew. You sitting down? Usually. Well, stay there. We pulled a body an hour ago from a car dumped off 10th Avenue. ID on it says Ralph Kendon. I looked at Wolfe, who had closed his eyes, fingers templed. You sure? The prints match. Some kind of chemical burns on the hands. No wallet, no keys, and, get this, some kind of violet petal stuck to the windshield glass. I was about to call you, figuring that kind of theatrical nonsense would interest your boss. Always nice when life syncs up with our decor, I said. Thanks, Inspector. Hold it. Don't thank me. I'm sending Stebbins to your place with the lab boys. Tell Wolfe to sit tight, and if he starts using that brain of his on police time, Inspector, he's a model of obedience. I hung up before he could finish laughing. Wolfe opened his eyes. Dead? Dead enough to stop arguing. Burns on the hands. Found with another violet tag. Same kind. He exhaled, a sound like a slow puncture. Then the invitation is authentic. Someone wants my attention. Or someone wants you framed for collecting flowers. He motioned for silence, which in Wolfe speak meant, I'm thinking faster than you talk. Archie, bring me the envelope again. I handed it over. He turned it over under the lamp. Note the watermark. Lincoln Bond, Albany. Not sold in New York since 1941. This was preserved deliberately. An old stock. Who keeps old stationery unless they've got nostalgia for ration coupons? The kind of person who treats messages as relics. He paused, then added, and who understands that such anachronism might entice me? You flatter easily, I said. But he wasn't smiling. The bell rang. That made twice in one morning, an all-time high for visitors not carrying groceries. I went to the door. Kramer's man, Stebbins, stood there, rain dripping off his hat brim, 2 uniforms behind him lugging a kit. Kramer says you're expecting us. I swung the door open wider. Come in. The orchids have been lonely. Stebbins nodded toward Wolfe's desk. That it? The star of the show. Wolfe didn't rise, but his voice filled the room. You will not, Mr. Stebbins, touch anything until you state precisely what you intend to do. Stebbins rubbed his jaw. Routine. Fingerprints, fiber dusting, photographs. Proceed. But Archie will observe and ensure nothing is compromised. That last word had enough frost on it to chill the room. While the lab boys worked, I watched the powder bloom on the envelope like frost on glass. One of them grunted. Partial prints, big hands, maybe 2 sets. Wolfe's are bigger, I said, and still attached. When they left, Stebbins took a last look at the violet. You know, it's funny. There was another one of those at the scene, pressed flat against the windshield like it was glued. So I heard, I said. You think it's a coincidence? I think coincidences don't usually come with postage. He tipped his hat. Kramer'll be in touch. As the door closed behind them, Wolfe muttered, In touch. Bah. They pawed at the relic and left unenlightened. They left powder, I said, and my rug looks like it hosted a snowstorm. He didn't reply. His gaze was fixed again on the violet. Archie, there are 3 interpretations for a dead man carrying an anonymous message. First, he was messenger and victim of the same hand. Second, he was complicit and removed for redundancy. Third, he mailed himself from the beyond. Confound it. You will please cease diluting logic with facetiousness. He leaned back, closing his eyes. You will go to 10th Avenue, inspect the car, the surroundings, the police report if possible. Speak to Kramer if he allows. I must remain to think. Sure, I said. And if I find another violet, do I pluck it or salute it? Bring it intact. The rain was steady when I hit the sidewalk, the kind that smothers footsteps but not questions. 10th Avenue looked like it always did. Grease, noise, and people minding their own business too loudly. The car sat behind a police cordon, its hood dented, glass spidered. Kramer was there, puffing a cigar that steamed in the drizzle. You again? He said. You tell Wolfe he's not to meddle. I'd need a louder megaphone for that. You got anything? He gestured to the car. Acid burns on the steering wheel. Lab says it's probably from fertilizer compound, industrial strength. The trunk was wiped clean, but we found an old shipping manifest tucked under the mat. Freight line, R. Kendon, foreman. So maybe the past paid him a visit. Maybe. He studied me through smoke. You got any idea why someone would write Wolfe a love letter on antique stationery? Maybe they admire his diet, I said. But if this was meant to bait him, they're halfway there. Kramer grunted. Tell him to stay out of my case. Sure, I'll carve it on the next violet. By the time I left, the streetlight halos were turning the puddles into little mirrors. Back at the brownstone, Fritz opened the door before I knocked. Mr. Wolfe is in the office, very impatient. That made two of us. Wolfe was in his chair, the violet gone from the blotter, replaced by a small bowl of water and a pair of tweezers. Observe, he said, the residue at the base of the stem, fertilizer crystals, the same compound Kramer's man will report on. So our joker works dirty. He nodded, and industriously. Whoever killed Kendon wished to leave a trail that leads nowhere visible, except into my garden. That stopped me. Your garden? Yes. That violet was pressed from a species that does not grow wild. It grows here, under my care, or at least it did. He turned his head slowly toward the window, where the faint outline of the greenhouse blurred behind rain. Someone has been in my garden, Archie. I stared at him. You mean someone walked past Fritz, up your steps, through your orchids, and plucked one without you noticing? Not plucked, replaced. He tapped the bowl with the tweezers. The petal's cellular decay is inconsistent with my samples. It was prepared with my methods, but not my hand. Meaning somebody's been studying your hobbies up close. Precisely. That word had weight now. The room felt smaller, even with the rain drumming outside. I waited. He didn't move. Finally, he said, We are no longer being invited, Archie. We are being investigated. Investigated, I repeated, because the word didn't sound right coming from Wolfe. You mean somebody's got a magnifying glass pointed at you? He didn't answer, just tilted his head toward the greenhouse, window as if the glass panes could confess. Someone capable of replicating my horticultural procedure has trespassed physically or intellectually. Either is intolerable. I said, if we're talking about intellectual trespass, the suspect list is half of New York and 3/4 of the police. Archie. His tone landed like a paperweight. You will please fetch the logbook from the plant room, the violet section. Sure. I crossed to the door, flipped the switch for the greenhouse lights, and the soft glare hit the rows of benches like a stage opening. The air was heavy and wet enough to ring. Wolfe's orchids looked smug. His violets sat in their corner, demure and innocent. I grabbed the logbook from the desk beside the fertilizer cabinet and brought it back. He opened it with the care of a man handling scripture. 6 weeks ago, I grafted a new series, African Violet, St. Paulia ionantha, cultivar Blue Charm. Only I and Fritz have entered that room since. Fritz being the soul of honesty, that leaves you with you. He looked up, one eyebrow lifting. Unless an intruder entered undetected, you'd have heard a spider sneeze in there. Perhaps, yet one specimen is missing. That got my full attention. You're sure? I am not given to hallucination. Page 74, note the entry. 20 cuttings established, 19 extant. You will please verify. I sighed, put down my coffee cup that had been getting cold since Prohibition, and headed back. The humid warmth hit again. The pots were arranged like soldiers at inspection, except one gap, a neat square where soil had been freshly turned and left slightly darker. Confirmed, I said, stepping back into the office. One flower AWOL. Looks recent, maybe last night. The soil's still moist on top. Wolfe nodded once. Then the envelope's violet was taken from here. Ergo, the culprit had access to this house. You're accusing Fritz? Pfui. Fritz would sooner burn my saucers than pilfer a bloom. No, someone else entered, either by key or by artifice. Or maybe someone bribed the milkman to pick souvenirs. That levity is misplaced. Someone entered my sanctum. That is a violation of the First Order, and if it connects to murder... He let the rest drift, which was Wolfe's way of saying thunder was warming up backstage. The phone rang. I grabbed it before Fritz could. Nero Wolfe's house of unwanted guests, I said. Goodwin, this is Kramer. The voice had gravel and impatience in equal parts. Tell your boss we found something else. The car wasn't dumped. It was parked there 2 nights before Kendon died. Witness saw a woman around it. Tall, red hair, fur collar. Redheads at midnight, always an omen. Cut the poetry. She left a glove inside the car. Expensive stuff, imported, initials MR stamped inside. You got any idea if that means something to your man? I turned to Wolfe. He waved a hand. Continue. Maybe. Any chance you'll loan it for a minute? Not unless Wolfe starts wearing heels. But I'll send you a photo, and Goodwin, tell Wolfe this one smells like his kind of trouble. That's why we keep the windows shut. I hung up and relayed the details. Wolfe listened without a muscle twitch. MR, he repeated. Archie, recall our client list from the past year. We didn't have an MR unless you count Mrs. Roscoe's Schnauzer case. He closed his eyes. Mrs. Roscoe, Margaret Roscoe. Widow, lives on Riverside Drive. Her husband owned a shipping firm, which handles freight. He opened his eyes again, slow and deliberate. Indeed. You will telephone her. Use discretion. Which brand of discretion do you want? Friendly or federal? Neither. Persuasive. I dialed. A woman's voice came on, cultured and taut. Yes. Mrs. Roscoe, my name's Goodwin, assistant to Nero Wolfe. Sorry to intrude, but a matter's come up involving a former employee of your late husband, Ralph Kendon. A pause, short and brittle. Kendon, he's been gone for years. Why? Because he's gone again, this time permanently. A breath caught on the line. You mean he's dead? That's the rumor. And his name turned up on something that might interest you, a freight manifest, connected to your husband's old company. I see. The tone flattened, as if she'd just put armor over it. Mr. Wolfe wishes to speak with me, preferably in person. There was another pause, longer this time. Very well, I'll come at once. When I hung up, Wolfe was already reaching for the bell cord. Fritz, arrange the front room. We expect a visitor. He turned back to me. Observe, Archie. The violet, the freight man, the woman connected by initials. These are not random alignments. They form a pattern. The question is whether she placed the flower or received it. Or smelled it before someone else croaked. She will tell us if she can lie badly enough. The doorbell rang before Fritz could polish the doorknob. I opened it. Margaret Roscoe stood there, a tall woman in a dark coat that didn't try to be fashionable. The red hair under the hat wasn't bright. It was the sort of red that carries a warning label. "Mr. Wolfe," she said when I ushered her in. "I understand you wanted to see me." "Sit," Wolfe said, gesturing toward the red chair as if it were a witness box. "You are acquainted with Mr. Ralph Kendon?" "Yes, my husband employed him." "Reliable," I thought. "You last saw him when?" 3 years ago, after my husband's death. He came to offer condolences. Then he vanished. I assumed he found other work." Wolfe inclined his head slightly. "Did your husband's company maintain any freight accounts involving hazardous materials?" She blinked. "Hazardous? Chemicals. Fertilizers, perhaps." "I believe so. My husband imported agricultural supplies for manufacturers upstate." I said, "Including industrial fertilizer that burns steering wheels?" Her eyes flicked toward me, sharp. "I don't know anything about that." Wolfe's voice softened. "Mrs. Roscoe, your husband's records, are they still in your possession?" "Some. In storage." "Why?" "Because the man who brought a message to me this morning, using my own violet as stationery, was found dead. And your initials were in the car where he died." That hit her like a slap. "My initials? That's impossible. She stopped, visibly steadying herself. "I did have gloves like that. They were stolen from my car last winter." Wolfe closed his eyes. "Convenient, yet possible. Archie, note her address. We shall visit her storage tomorrow." She rose halfway. "Visit? I thought you never—" "Madam, the phrase is figurative. My assistant will attend. Meanwhile, I must insist you refrain from discussing this matter with the police until I determine whether you are victim or vector." "I don't understand." "You will," Wolfe said gently. "If you are innocent, you are being used. If you are guilty, you are being played." Her eyes darted to the violet bowl on the desk. "That flower, why show me that?" "Because it was taken from my greenhouse," he said. "Someone wished to ensure that I noticed its absence. You may go now." When she left, the air seemed to exhale with her. I turned to Wolfe. "You believe her?" "No." He reached for a beer. "But I believe someone believes she is expendable." "Meaning she's next?" "Meaning Archie. We are no longer investigating a murder. We are interrupting one." "Interrupting one," I said, "is usually the part where we call Kramer before someone gets ideas about redecorating with corpses." Wolfe's eyes flicked toward me, half annoyance, half thought. "No. Inspector Kramer is a blunt instrument. We require precision. You will watch Mrs. Roscoe." "Meaning trail her?" "If you prefer that vulgar terminology, yes. Discreetly. She will attempt some contact before nightfall, with whomever arranged this pantomime. I must know to whom she reports, willingly or otherwise." "Fine," I said. "But she's got the kind of face that makes a tale feel like an autograph hound." "Your vanity will survive. Go now." I grabbed my hat, coat, and a vague sense of optimism and stepped out into a drizzle that had upgraded to committed rain. Her cab was still idling at the curb. I flagged the next one, told the driver to keep it 2 cars back. Mrs. Roscoe's car turned uptown, the kind of careful driving you get from someone who's balancing fear and reputation. We followed her to Riverside Drive, where the townhouses wear their mortgages proudly. She stopped outside one, the number matching what I'd noted earlier, and went in without, glancing around. I paid the driver and took a detour on foot, cutting across to a narrow service alley that ended behind her building. The rear courtyard was quiet except for the sound of water dripping from an iron fire escape. Light glowed faint through the first-floor curtains. Her study, I guessed. A shadow moved across the window, then another. Male, tall, angular, shoulders squared like they'd been taught to carry something heavier than good manners. I edged closer until I caught the murmur of voices. "Told you he would notice," the man said. "You never should have gone to him." Her voice, sharp, I didn't have a choice. You said Kendon was only supposed to deliver the note. He did. And then he got greedy. Greedy. He's dead. A pause. Then the man's laugh. Low and wrong. Exactly. That was my cue. I slid along the brick wall trying to catch a reflection off the window glass, but the rain and the curtain didn't cooperate. I could see just enough, a shape leaning toward her, his hand raised as if to make a point or erase one. I moved fast. 2 steps, hand on the back door handle. It was locked. A crash from inside answered the question I hadn't asked. Damn it, I muttered and shouldered through. The latch gave with a sound like guilt. Inside, the smell of overturned perfume and paper hit me first. Mrs. Roscoe was backed against the desk, eyes wide, while the man, tall, narrow face, wet hair slicked to the skull, spun toward me. "Who the hell—" he started, but my left fist finished his sentence. He went down among the scatter of papers. Mrs. Roscoe gasped. "Mr. Goodwin, yeah, the same. You all right?" She nodded, but the tremor said otherwise. I bent, grabbed the guy's collar, and hauled him upright. He came with a groan, dazed enough not to argue. "Your friend here," I said, "just earned himself a long talk with Inspector Kramer." "No police," she said sharply. "Please. That's becoming a theme today." She shook her head. "You don't understand. He works for my husband's old partner, Mr. Arlen." Wolfe's memory flashed across my mind like a light bulb going on. Arlen Shipping, partner in the Roscoe business until a quiet split 5 years ago. I said, "Arlen, as in Walter Arlen." "Yes." The man on the floor stirred, muttered something about minding my own business, and tried to stand. I helped him back down. "Tell Wolfe," I said, "that his hunch paid double." I found her phone, dialed the brownstone. Wolfe answered on the 3rd ring. "Yes?" "It's Archie. I just interrupted an unscheduled strangling. Mrs. Roscoe's guest was about to rearrange her airway. Says he works for Walter Arlen." There was the sound of Wolfe exhaling through his nose, which from him counts as a siren. "You will detain the man if feasible." "Already seated." "And Mrs. Roscoe?" "Shaken, not stirred." "Good, I will. Speak with her when you return. Bring them both." "Both?" "Both. And Archie. See that neither of them perish en route. It would irritate me." The line clicked dead. I looked at Mrs. Roscoe. "You heard the man. Pack a nerve and come along." She hesitated, staring at the unconscious character on her rug. "His name is Lang. Gerald Lang. He handled accounts for my husband before everything ended. Nice resume. Let's go." I phoned for a cab. Lang protested consciousness on the way down the stairs, but I convinced him to prefer silence. By the time we hit West 35th Street again, Wolfe was waiting in his chair, a beer untouched beside him. Fritz had set out an extra glass, which in this house meant the guest was in for confession. Wolfe's eyes moved from her to Lang, cataloguing both without emotion. "Mr. Lang, you appear somewhat disarranged." Lang's jaw tightened. "You broke into private property. I could press charges." "You might," Wolfe said mildly. "But considering you attempted to murder your hostess, your standing in court might wilt." Lang's glare turned to Mrs. Roscoe. "You brought him there?" "She didn't invite me," I said. "I'm just the chaperone." Wolfe leaned back. "Let us cease the dramatics. Mr. Lang, your employer, Mr. Arlen, does he still control any remaining accounts tied to Roscoe Freight?" Lang's lips twisted. "You think this is about business? You're out of your mind." "Possibly," Wolfe said, "but less so than a man who fabricates murder invitations with imported stationery." Lang's head jerked. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You do. You delivered to Kendon the materials he used when Kendon threatened to reveal something. some financial transgression or crime, you silenced him. Then you attempted to dispose of the witness who might confirm his association with Arlen. Lang's knuckles whitened. That's a fairy tale. Then correct it, Wolfe said smoothly. Lang opened his mouth, then shut it. A bead of sweat slid down his temple. You can't prove anything. Proof is a matter of patience. I have both. Mrs. Roscoe turned suddenly. Walter planned this, didn't he? He sent Kendon to you to provoke interest and then killed him to tie it all to me. Wolfe didn't answer directly. Archie, fetch the violet specimen. I brought it from the desk. He held it up between thumb and forefinger. Mrs. Roscoe, this was taken from my greenhouse. The thief knew how to enter without disturbing Fritz, knew which bench held the blue charm cultivar. Who in your circle might possess such knowledge? She stared. Walter, he was an amateur botanist. He used to visit you years ago for advice about his conservatory. That, Wolfe said, is what I wish to confirm. He set the violet back on the blotter as if restoring a crown jewel. Mr. Lang, when you report to your employer tonight, and you will tell him that his performance has succeeded. Mr. Wolfe is intrigued. Then you will arrange another meeting with Mrs. Roscoe, present ostensibly to clarify the misunderstanding, and you will do so under my instruction. Lang barked a laugh. And why would I? Because, Wolfe said softly, if you do not, I shall ensure that Kramer receives the record of Kendon's employment, your fingerprints from the envelope, and a sworn statement from Mrs. Roscoe. Choose. Lang's shoulders sagged. All right, I'll do it. Tonight. Excellent. Archie will accompany you. I blinked. Will he? Yes. Invisible, if possible. Visible, if necessary. Lang glanced at me. Swallowed. Arlen won't like surprises. Nor do I, Wolfe said. Go now. Report by telephone when the meeting is arranged. As the door shut behind them, Wolfe turned to Mrs. Roscoe. Madame, you will remain here. You are in danger only while ignorant. Her eyes were wide, frightened but resolute. And you think you can stop him? Wolfe's voice was calm. Madam, if I could not, I would never have left my chair to try. If you could not, I said, you'd probably draft a memo explaining why and make Fritz frame it. Wolfe gave me a look that could have chilled soup. Archie, your wit is a weed that thrives on neglect. Kindly fetch the notebook. We shall prepare for Mr. Arlen's next move. I picked up the black leather book he keeps for cases too fresh to label. He opened it, dipped his pen, and began dictating in that slow, deliberate tone that makes you want to apologize for breathing. Ralph Kendon, deceased. Courier of message containing violet. Gerald Lang, intermediary and accomplice. Walter Arlen, presumed orchestrator and murderer. Motive, concealment of prior misappropriation. I cut in. Or maybe he just doesn't like flowers. Archie. Yes, sir. He continued. Concealment of prior misappropriation of freight assets following the death of partner Roscoe. Mrs. Margaret Roscoe, pawn or potential inheritor of guilt. He signed his name at the bottom as if that made it scripture. Now, he said, telephone Mr. Lang. Confirm the meeting. Lang answered on the third ring. Voice tight. It's arranged. Arlen's office, 9 o'clock. He thinks I'm bringing Mrs. Roscoe to discuss the police inquiry. Excellent, Wolfe said when I relayed it. You will accompany him. Keep your revolver. That's the first time you've said that without a sermon. I am economizing breath. You may require it. I pocketed the .38, turned to Mrs. Roscoe. If you stay here, you'll be fine. Fritz will keep you supplied with brandy and reassurance. She nodded, though her fingers were white against the chair arm. Be careful. That's my middle name, I said, and got the same look Wolfe gives orchids with fungus. Lang was waiting in the car outside, smoking like he was trying to set fire to his nerves. You sure about this? He asked as I slid in beside him. No, I said. But Wolfe's sure, and that's enough to make the devil reconsider his options. The streets gleamed wet under the lamps as we headed downtown. Arlen's office occupied the top floor of a warehouse that smelled of oil and regret. The elevator groaned its way up. Lang said nothing, just wiped his palms on his coat. The doors opened on a hallway too clean for freight business. We walked to the glass door marked Walter Arlen & Co. Lang pushed it open, and the man himself was waiting behind a wide desk. He looked like a blueprint for respectability. Silver hair, neat mustache, eyes pale and neat as ledger columns. "Lang," he said, voice smooth. "And Mr. Goodwin, I presume. I wondered how long Wolfe would take to send you." That stopped me. "You expected us?" He smiled slightly. "I expected someone. When Kendon turned up dead, the pattern was obvious. Wolfe can't resist a provocation." Lang stiffened. "Mr. Arlen, I didn't tell him anything." "Quiet." Arlen gestured toward the chair opposite. "Sit, Mr. Goodwin. You can tell Wolfe I appreciate the bait being swallowed, but the game is already over." "That's optimistic," I said, "considering your employee's performance in attempted strangulation." Arlen shrugged. Lang was enthusiastic. Loyalty breeds clumsiness. "Right now, it's breeding evidence." He leaned forward, fingertips touching. "You think you're holding the winning card, but you're not. That envelope, the violet, those were insurance." I expected Wolfe to connect them. It's the kind of intellectual breadcrumb trail he adores. Meanwhile, the real matter proceeds unimpeded. I kept my face blank. "Meaning what?" "Meaning the last shipment under Roscoe's name departs tonight from Pier 92. When it's gone, so are the records." Lang turned, startled. "You didn't say—" "I didn't have to," Arlen said. "Your part is done." There was a gun on the desk, small and polished. He didn't reach for it. He didn't need to. The move itself was enough. "Wolfe will know," I said. "By the time he does, there'll be nothing left to know." I shifted, feeling the weight of the .38 under my coat. "You might want to think that through. Wolfe's idea of revenge doesn't stop at words. Neither does mine." He stood, and that was my cue. I moved faster. The revolver cleared my pocket just as Lang lunged sideways. The gun on the desk barked once. Glass shattered behind me. I fired low, enough to take out confidence, not circulation. Arlen's weapon spun away. Lang kicked it under the desk. For a second, the only sound was rain against the window and Arlen's breathing, sharp and shallow. "You're finished," I said. He straightened slowly. "You won't get far. The shipment's already being loaded. By the time Wolfe gets his paperwork, it'll be ash." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe Wolfe's already making a few phone calls." That drew the first crack in his composure. He blinked. "What? You think he sent me here without backup? Fritz is charming, but he's not the only one in the house with a telephone." Arlen opened his mouth to reply, then froze as the door burst open. Two men in plain clothes stepped in, wet coats, guns ready. Behind them came Kramer, cigar clamped in his teeth like a flag. "Well, well," he said. "Looks like I crashed the right party." "Nice timing," I told him. "You always this punctual when Wolfe doesn't invite you?" Kramer scowled. "He didn't have to. I've been following the paper trail from Kendon's car since lunch. Guess who owned the storage lot? Arlen here. And the fertilizer compound that cooked Kendon's hands. Registered to his company." Arlen's shoulders sank a little, the way a man folds his last defense. "This is absurd." "Sure," Kramer said. "You can tell the judge all about it. Let's go." As they hauled him out, Lang looked at me. "You set me up." "No," I said. "You set yourself up. I just carried the chair." Kramer gave me a side glance. "Wolfe knew you'd need help? Let's just say he prefers his victories wrapped and delivered." Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was precisely where I'd left him. Chair, beer, serenity. When I walked in, he didn't look up. "Report," he said. "Arlen tried to tie up loose ends with a .32 automatic. He's now tied up himself. Kramer's got him and Lang both." Wolfe nodded once. Slow. "Satisfactory?" Mrs. Roscoe rose from her chair, face pale but relieved. "Then it's over. For you, madam, yes. For me, only once the newspapers have exhausted their adjectives." She managed a smile. "I owe you my life." He inclined his head. "No, madam, you owe me nothing but quiet." She left soon after, escorted by Fritz. I stayed, waiting for the moment Wolfe's brain shifted from solution to philosophy. It didn't take long. He looked at the violet on the desk, now brittle and almost black. "An apt emblem," he said. "Modesty, they say. Yet beneath it, poison for the soil if cultivated poorly. Humanity, Archie, is the same." "Sure," I said, "but violets don't shoot at you." He gave a faint snort, somewhere between amusement and digestion. "Pfui, bring me another beer." "Another beer," I repeated, heading toward the kitchen, "and a medal for the guy who had to wrestle a gunman without backup." "You were quite sufficiently rewarded by surviving," Wolfe said, which in his economy of praise was a standing ovation. I set the bottle beside him and dropped into the red chair. "Kramer'll be crowing. He got the arrest, you got the satisfaction, and I got rainwater down my collar. We all win." "Do not be glib, Archie. The matter is incomplete." "That's news to Kramer. He's probably halfway to a press conference." "Kramer is a man of appetites, but truth is rarely one of them." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Something remains inconsistent. I waited, because when he used inconsistent in that tone, it meant somebody's ghost was about to stand up and wave. He tapped his finger once on the violet bowl. If Arlen was the mastermind, why deliver the provocation to me? His intention was concealment, not exhibition. Maybe he wanted bragging rights. Pfui. Arlen was vain, not suicidal. The envelope, the flower, the note, these bespoke intimate knowledge of my habits. Arlen had met me, yes, but he lacked that intimacy. Another hand guided his performance. I said, "So you think he had a director?" "Exactly, and one who has not yet taken a bow." Before I could argue, the phone rang. Fritz answered, then called out, "Inspector Kramer for Mr. Wolfe." Wolfe grunted, "Of course," and took the receiver. "Yes, Inspector." Kramer's voice was loud enough that I caught most of it from across the room. "Wolfe, I don't know what kind of tricks you're playing, but Arlen's not talking. He swears he was framed. And the freight shipment he mentioned. Empty crates. Somebody cleaned it out ahead of us." Wolfe's brow twitched. "Indeed. Then the true contraband has already been moved. I presume your men found no trace." "Not a splinter, and Lang clammed up, says his lawyer told him to forget English. I commend his obedience. Thank you, Inspector. That will be all." He hung up and looked at me. "Archie, it appears the corpse of this case has twitched." "You mean Arlen wasn't the big fish?" "He was bait. Someone ensured that when he fell the net would be empty. Someone with a knack for gardening and murder?" He gave a slow nod. "Precisely. Fetch Mrs. Roscoe." I went to the hall, called up the stairs. She appeared a minute later, pale and collected, as if she'd been practicing calm for years. "Mr. Wolfe," she said softly. He gestured her to sit. "Madam, I must ask an impertinent question. Did your husband ever keep personal correspondence relating to his partnership with Mr. Arlen, particularly letters of credit or shipment manifests not filed with the company?" She frowned. "He did, yes. He distrusted Arlen. After his death, I packed everything into a trunk in the cellar." "And that trunk is still in your possession?" "I believe so. I locked the storage myself." Wolfe's eyes gleamed faintly. "Then you, madam, hold the motive entire. If those documents exposed financial fraud, Arlen's fear was justified. But the person who manipulated him, who lured me, and who killed Kendon sought those records before anyone else. She stiffened. You think someone broke into my house? Not into your house, madam. Into mine. He turned his head toward me. Archie, telephone Saul Panzer. Saul answered on the second ring, the way only a man who never naps does. Panzer. Saul, report to Mrs. Roscoe's residence immediately. Guard her cellar trunk. You may encounter company. Be armed and prudent. Got it, he said, and hung up. Wolfe leaned back. Now we wait. Which for you means thinking. For me it means pacing. He ignored that. His eyes had gone unfocused, fixed somewhere beyond the ceiling. That was the look he gets when his brain starts shuffling cards nobody else can see. I let him work. It couldn't have been more than half an hour before the phone rang again. I grabbed it. Goodwin. Saul's voice came crisp and low. Archie, tell Wolfe someone beat me here. Storage locks forced, trunks open. Whoever did it left fast. Tire tracks in the alley. Small car, maybe a coupe. I'll tail. Careful, I said. Always. I hung up. Your guess was right, I told Wolfe. Trunk's been raided. Saul's on the trail. He nodded once, grimly. As expected. The thief knew our timing. Mrs. Roscoe, who besides yourself knew of that trunk? No one, she said, eyes wide. Not even the servants. Then, madam, someone heard you tell me. She blanched. You mean here, in this house? I do. Wolfe rang the bell. Fritz appeared, immaculate and unruffled. Fritz, when you received Mrs. Roscoe earlier, did anyone come to the door subsequently? He frowned, thinking. Yes, sir. A man came not long after Mr. Goodwin left. He said he was from the police, asking for you. My stomach dropped. You didn't let him in? I did not. But he asked strange questions about your orchids, Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe's eyes snapped open. Describe him. Tall, thin, grey coat, hat pulled low. I whistled. Lang. Not necessarily, Wolfe said. Lang was in custody. Another could have assumed his manner, but the interest in my orchids confirms it. The intruder is the same who took the violet. Our adversary is precise, methodical, and audacious. I said, and right now he's got the papers. For the moment. Wolfe's tone cooled. Archie, summon Mr. Kramer again. Inform him to seal all exits from the city's freight district. The thief's purpose is flight or destruction. Either will occur near the river. I made the call. Kramer barked questions, swore, then agreed. Fine, I'll humor your genius. But if this turns into another of your parlor tricks, save your indignation for success, Inspector, Wolfe said when I passed him the phone. We waited. The minutes stretched tight and silent, except for the faint hiss of rain against the glass. Mrs. Roscoe sat motionless, hands clenched in her lap. The phone rang again. I caught it. Goodwin. Saul's voice, quick and breathless. Archie, I've got him. Small coupe headed for Pier 92. He's carrying something heavy. Could be. The trunk papers. Looks like he's planning to dump them. Wolfe rose, an event so rare it had weather significance. Archie, the car. Quickly. I stared. You're coming. Yes. He adjusted his vest, every movement exact. The thief has violated my home and my reason. He shall not have the satisfaction of escaping either. We were out the door in record time. Fritz's face in the hallway looked like a man watching history commit a misdemeanor. The sedan's engine coughed awake. Wolfe wedged into the back seat, scowling as if the upholstery had insulted him. I drove fast enough to make the wipers complain, heading toward the river. The piers loomed up, black against grey water. Saul's voice came through the open window from where he flagged us down. He's there, he said, pointing toward the end of the dock. Dumping the case. I left the engine running. Wolfe's hand came down heavy on my shoulder. Alive, Archie. Understood. I slipped out, rain cutting across my face, gun in hand. The figure at the pier's edge turned as I approached, coat flapping, hat gone. It wasn't Lang. It was Fritz's earlier visitor, the grey-coated man. He froze when he saw me. "Hold it," I said. "Police are on their way." He bolted. I lunged, caught his arm, and we went down hard. The case hit the planks, burst open, papers scattered like startled pigeons, shipping records, banknotes, letters. He struggled once more, then went limp as Saul appeared out of the dark to help haul him up. "Got him," Saul said. "And look at that." Wolfe was there a moment later, umbrella useless in his fist. His eyes scanned the wreckage at our feet. "Ah," he said softly, "the Roscoe ledgers." Kramer's siren wailed somewhere beyond the warehouses, closing in. Wolfe exhaled once, deeply. "Archie, gather the papers. This charade has reached its denouement." "Sure," I said, shoving the last damp folder into the case. "And next time somebody leaves you a flower, maybe we stick to orchids." Kramer's siren hadn't even finished echoing across the dock when his voice took over the air. "Goodwin, what the devil? Every time I turn my back, you're in the middle of a crime scene that used to be neat." I looked up from the pile of soggy papers. "Neatness is overrated. You'll find the man who ruined it right here." I nudged the grey-coated thief, now slumped against a crate with Saul watching him like he was an amateur pickpocket. Kramer bent, cigar smoke mixing with the damp. "Name?" The man spat out a mouthful of rainwater. "Harris." "First name?" "Doesn't matter." Kramer grabbed his collar. "It will in 5 seconds if you don't start cooperating." Wolfe's voice cut through the night, smooth and resonant, even under the drizzle. "Inspector, the man's name is Leonard Harris, formerly a clerk at Arlen & Co., dismissed for falsifying invoices. His reappearance, tonight, in possession of stolen company ledgers, is hardly coincidental." Kramer straightened, frowning. "You sure?" "I'm never sure until I am," Wolfe replied. "But at this juncture, I'm certain enough to proceed." I said, "He broke into Wolfe's greenhouse, stole a violet, used it for decoration, killed Kendon, framed Arlen, and took the Roscoe ledgers to bury the evidence. That enough for an opening statement?" Kramer grunted. "You're saying this paper jockey masterminded the whole show?" Wolfe stepped closer, rain darkening his shoulders. "Mastermind is too generous. Mr. Harris is an opportunist. When Mr. Roscoe died, he uncovered discrepancies in the freight accounts. Arlen's embezzlement, yes, but also his own. When Arlen severed the partnership, Harris found himself exposed. He needed leverage and confusion, hence the violet." Harris barked a hoarse laugh. "You talk pretty, fat man, but you don't know a damn thing." "Indeed," Wolfe said mildly. "Perhaps you will enlighten me." Harris lunged then, trying to shove Saul aside and make a run for the pier's edge. It was the worst idea he'd had all evening. Saul's elbow caught him mid-stride, and I added a forearm to the equation. He folded back down where he belonged. Kramer said, "Take him, boys." And 2 uniforms moved in. They dragged Harris toward the waiting car, boots splashing through puddles. As the sirens dwindled, Wolfe stood immobile, eyes following the grey smudge of the river. His lips barely moved. "We will need to examine those papers in detail." I closed the case and handed it over. "If they're dry enough to read." "They will serve," he said. "Come, Archie, this place offends me." In the car, Wolfe settled into silence. His bulk shifted once as we turned uptown, but his eyes stayed half-closed, mind working in those quiet spirals that usually end with someone confessing. I didn't interrupt. The rhythm of the tires filled the gaps between us. Back at the brownstone, Fritz met us with towels and an expression that mixed relief and shock. "Mr. Wolfe, you went outside." "Do not commemorate it," Wolfe muttered. "Brandy, if you please." Mrs. Roscoe stood when we entered, hands twisting in her lap. "You found them?" "The ledgers are safe." Wolfe said. Their contents, I suspect, will prove both enlightening and distasteful. She clasped her hands tighter. And Mr. Arlen? In custody, I said, though not for long, if Kramer verifies Wolfe's theory. Wolfe lowered himself into the chair and opened the case. The papers gave off the smell of damp ink and mildew. He began leafing through with a precision that would shame an archivist. Observe, Archie, he murmured, tapping one page. Here, transfers from Roscoe Freight to a shell company, Harris's creation. And here, payments funneled through Kendon's freight division. It aligns perfectly. Meaning Arlen wasn't stealing alone. Meaning Arlen didn't even comprehend the scale. Mrs. Roscoe's voice trembled. Then Harris, he was the one who, yes, Wolfe said without sympathy. Kendon discovered the false accounts and sought to blackmail his partner. Harris silenced him, then manipulated the remains to implicate Arlen. And to ensure my attention, he used my own horticultural habits as a lure. A clever stratagem, though fatal in its vanity. I leaned on the desk. You're saying he wanted you involved? Wolfe's mouth twitched. Of course. My reputation ensured that the police would defer to me long enough for him to destroy the evidence. Had I been slower or more gullible, he would have succeeded. Then that note, for the man who never leaves his house, was a dare. Precisely. An appeal to pride. He miscalculated the direction of that vice. Fritz returned with the brandy. Wolfe poured 2 fingers and regarded it as if the amber surface could applaud. Mrs. Roscoe, these documents will exonerate your late husband's estate and condemn Harris completely. But I regret they will also reveal less admirable financial improvisations by Mr. Arlen. I don't care, she said quietly, as long as the truth stands. Good. Wolfe leaned back, letting the brandy glow in his hand. Then the matter is concluded. I raised an eyebrow. You're sure? Harris seems like the type who might try one last encore. Wolfe glanced toward the window. If he does, he will find the curtain drawn. I didn't argue. The tone said he meant it. The silence settled like furniture. Heavy, familiar, final. I was almost convinced we were done when the phone rang again. I grabbed it. Goodwin! Kramer's voice came through, irritated but alive. Wolfe there? Yes. Tell him Harris is singing and he's off key. Claims he didn't kill Kendon. Wolfe's head lifted. He said. That was the missing note. Kramer growled. You said Harris did it. I said he silenced him. The method remained ambiguous. Harris lacked the nerve for direct murder. Someone else performed that task. Someone who now remains unaccounted for. Kramer cursed softly. Don't start rewriting this thing, Wolfe. I've got a dozen witnesses ready to swear Harris handled everything. Do they also swear he left fingerprints on the weapon? A pause. No weapon was found. Precisely. Which means our last player is still at liberty. Kramer muttered something unprintable. You think there's another? There is always another. Retrieve Lang from custody immediately. He has information he dared not use while Arlen lived. Kramer swore again, but agreed. Wolfe hung up, his fingers drumming once on the arm of his chair. Archie, prepare for a guest. Lang? Yes. The man has been at the periphery too long. His silence is now conspicuous. The doorbell rang 20 minutes later, which in detective arithmetic meant Wolfe had been correct again. I opened it to find Lang standing there, hat in hand, eyes shadowed. Kramer let me go, he said. He said Wolfe wanted to talk. Wolfe always wants to talk. Come in. He stepped inside, glancing around as though the walls might accuse him. Wolfe gestured to the red chair. Mr. Lang, you have an opportunity to reclaim dignity. Harris has confessed to theft, but denies the murder of Kendon. Will you contradict him? Lang hesitated, jaw tightening. No. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. No? I didn't kill Kendon either. Who did? Lang swallowed. Arlen. I started to speak, but Wolfe lifted a finger. Explain. Arlen found out Kendon had the papers, those ledgers. He told me to deliver the envelope, make it look like Harris's trick. I didn't know it was bait. When Kendon got spooked and tried to run, Arlen lost control. He used the acid compound from the warehouse, said it'd look like an accident. Yet Harris took credit. He thought it was safer that way. He figured Arlen would protect him. Lang's voice dropped. But once Arlen was cornered, he panicked. Tried to blame me. Wolfe regarded him for a long moment, then nodded once. Thank you, Mr. Lang. Your cowardice has finally served a purpose. Lang's face flushed. I told you the truth. Indeed, Wolfe said. It is the one tool left to the powerless. When Lang was gone, Wolfe exhaled, long and quiet. Archie, prepare a report for Kramer. It will satisfy him, though not delight him. I reached for the notebook. Title it, what? The Case of the Violet Ego? He frowned. Do not be facetious. Title it, The Garden of Accounting. I grinned. Sure, nothing says murder like bookkeeping. He sipped the last of his brandy, eyes half closed. On the contrary, Archie, in both, one buries evidence, sometimes in soil, sometimes in ink. The room went still except for the rain easing into a whisper against the glass. Wolfe leaned back, content, while I shut the ledger of another mess cleaned up by logic and luck. His logic, my luck. And for once, both felt evenly matched. Wolfe hadn't moved for nearly a full minute after my last sentence landed, just sat there as the rain softened outside, eyes on the violet bow that had outlived the case it symbolized. The light from the lamp cut across the gold label of his beer bottle, and I could almost hear the gears inside that massive head shifting into their slowest, deepest grind. Then, without looking at me, he said, Archie, bring me the telephone. I got it off the stand and set it on the desk. You expecting applause from Kramer? I expect information. Harris's confession is insufficient. It lacks corroborative anatomy. You mean bones? Precisely. He dialed, one thick finger at a time, then waited, breathing short, through his nose. Inspector, good. Inform your laboratory that I require immediate examination of the violet sent with the original envelope. The adhesive, as I observed, was casein-based. It should reveal fingerprints other than Kendon's or mine. Whatever Kramer said on the other end made Wolfe's eyes flick once, annoyed. You may tell your technicians, he said, that a truth delayed is as useless as a rotten pear. I shall expect your report within the hour. He hung up. I said, if I ever talk to people like that, you'll accuse me of insubordination. You possess neither the leverage nor the vocabulary, he murmured. Now attend me. I took the red chair. Wolfe leaned forward, both forearms on the desk, as if anchoring a world map. Our sequence is tidy, yet unconvincing. Arlen kills Kendon to protect his fraud. Harris manipulates the remains for advantage. Lang hides behind fear, but the central curiosity persists. Why the violet? Why the need to announce himself to me? Ego, we covered that. No. Wolfe's eyes gleamed. It was not vanity alone. It was camouflage. Someone wanted me to misattribute the provocation to Harris or Arlen. The true originator was neither. I waited, but he was in no hurry to share. The rain picked up again, light on the windows like fingers tapping for attention. He said finally, Archie, the flower was handled by an expert, the stem sealed with my own mixture, yet when I examined it earlier, there was a trace of contamination. Chlorinated residue, faint but distinct. That formula does not exist in my greenhouse. I said, meaning our mystery guest's got his own greenhouse. Precisely. And only one man in this city once used my compound recipe. He visited here 2 years ago, seeking consultation on cultivation. Mr. Walter Arlen's horticultural advisor, a fellow named Morton Vale. Never heard of him? You wouldn't have. He disappeared shortly after Roscoe's death, claiming overseas employment. I dismissed it as irrelevance then. I was wrong. Before I could comment, the phone rang again. Fritz answered in the hall and came back pale. Mr. Wolfe, it's Inspector Kramer. He says the violet's adhesive contains fingerprints belonging to a deceased individual. Wolfe's eyes half closed. Name? Fritz swallowed. Morton Vale. That cracked the room's silence in half. Wolfe didn't raise his voice, but the air got heavier. Archie, we are being rehearsed in circles. Vale is dead, yet his prints appear on a message delivered yesterday. That is not the work of chance. It is orchestration. I said, You think someone used his prints? Like a stamp? He nodded slowly. Or preserved them deliberately. A specimen jar, a glove, some grotesque curiosity. It is the signature of someone who admires cleverness for its own sake. Harris lacked the intellect. Arlen lacked the imagination. There remains only one candidate. I didn't like the tone. Don't say it. Mrs. Roscoe. That hit like cold water. You're saying she possessed motive, proximity, and composure. The trunk of records could have incriminated her husband equally with Arlen. By manipulating all parties, Harris, Lang, Arlen, she secures both revenge and absolution. And who better to lure me than a woman aware of my predictable curiosity? I shook my head. I've seen women lie better, but not with that kind of precision. She was scared. Archie, fear is a performance. Some perform it better than truth. He pressed the bell. Fritz appeared instantly. Request Mrs. Roscoe's presence. When she entered, she looked calmer than any woman whose world had just been vacuumed. She even smiled faintly. Inspector Kramer called just now, she said. He said everything's been resolved. Is that true? Not entirely, Wolfe said. Please sit. She obeyed, folding her hands in her lap like a diligent pupil. He said, Mrs. Roscoe, you have endured much. Yet I must ask directly, why did you deceive us? Her smile thinned. Deceive? Indeed, you told me you knew nothing of horticulture. Yet the adhesive used on that violet could only be produced by someone who has handled my formula. And your late husband's records show a purchase of such materials for his home conservatory under your name. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came. Then, I didn't kill anyone. I did not say you did, Wolfe replied. But you contrived an exquisite fraud. You used Vale's preserved fingerprints to fashion the illusion of a returning ghost, ensuring suspicion drifted toward Arlen's circle while you remained the bereaved widow. Your intent, however, went awry when Harris intervened prematurely. Her eyes flashed. First fear, then something sharper. You can't prove that. I can demonstrate it, Wolfe said. When Harris stole the ledgers, he also stole the container of adhesive from your cellar workshop. He believed it ordinary glue. It bears your fingerprint as well on the interior lid. I've already requested confirmation from Kramer's laboratory. The silence afterward was tight as piano wire. She looked from him to me and back again, calculation flickering behind her lashes. You're bluffing. Am I? Wolfe lifted the phone. Archie, dial Inspector Kramer. Tell him to expedite the report. That did it. Her breath hitched once, the composure cracking like thin ice. All right, she whispered. Yes, I made the envelope. But I didn't want anyone killed. Explain. She drew a shaky breath. After my husband died, I found letters, proof that Arlen and Harris had bled the company dry. I went to Arlen. He laughed at me. So I planned to expose him publicly by sending that message to you. I thought if Wolfe got involved, the truth would come out. But Kendon, he came too, my house demanding money for his silence. I gave him the envelope to deliver and thought that would end it. Then someone, killed him. Harris, Wolfe said. She nodded weakly. I didn't even know Vale was dead until now. He taught me about plants. The fingerprints. I kept one of his gloves from the conservatory. I used it because I wanted the message to look mysterious, not traceable to me. Her voice dropped into the silence like a confession being buried. Wolfe regarded her steadily. Madame, your guilt is not legal but moral. You conjured an illusion and loosed it into a world too coarse to appreciate restraint. Others carried it to its logical conclusion. She looked up. Will you tell the police? I will tell them what they need to know, he said. That the instigator was reckless, not murderous. Kramer may roar, but he will acquiesce. Her shoulders slumped. Then it's over. It will be, once you sign a statement corroborating Harris's theft and Arlen's assault. Archie will take it down. She nodded, silent tears cutting through whatever makeup she had left. I sat opposite, pen scratching across paper while Wolfe dictated, clinical, unsparing, exact. When she signed, her hand trembled just once. After Fritz escorted her upstairs, Wolfe leaned back and exhaled through his nose. A tedious business, he said. Murder dressed as morality never interests me. I capped my pen. You going to let her off? She has already punished herself, he said. There is no heavier sentence than realizing one's cleverness caused a death. Try telling that to Kramer, he grunted. Kramer is welcome to the noise. I prefer silence. I glanced at the violet, now darkened to the color of old bruises. You know, I said, that thing's been sitting there through 3 deaths and a confession. You ever think of throwing it out? He eyed it, then shook his head. No. It will remind me that imitation, like deceit, requires maintenance. I prefer neither. The clock ticked softly. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city clean enough to pretend. Wolfe closed his eyes, and I could tell the curtain had dropped for him. For me, I was just glad the stage lights had gone out without anyone else taking a bow. The sound of her heels faded up the staircase, and the brownstone exhaled the way it does after trouble leaves, but before peace remembers to settle in. Wolfe didn't move. The lamp's light flattened the lines on his face, and for the first time that evening, I thought he looked older. Not tired, exactly, just aware of how many crimes were caused by cleverness instead of hunger. He said finally, Archie, have Fritz remove that violet. I raised an eyebrow. Retirement? I thought you were going to keep it as a moral souvenir. It has served its purpose. I detest relics of folly. I picked up the bowl, careful not to spill the stale water, and handed it to Fritz, who carried it away as if it might explode. When the door clicked shut behind him, Wolfe said, Now, the statement. She signed it, I said. Neat as a typist's carbon. Indeed. But Kramer will not accept sentiment as evidence. He will demand verification of her claims. Then he can demand all he likes. Harris is locked up. Arlen's dead by reputation, if not by sentence, and the widow's the only one who didn't shoot or steal. You could call that tidy. Archie, Wolfe murmured. Tidiness is an illusion dependent on what one chooses to sweep under the rug. He tapped the edge of the desk. There is still an inconsistency. I should have known. Let me guess. It's shaped like a fingerprint. No, it is shaped like a conscience. That earned him a pause. Yours or hers? Neither, he said. Kendon's. I frowned. He's not exactly taking visitors. Nevertheless, he attempted something before his death. A message. He delivered the envelope not because he feared Harris or Arlen, but because he feared what Mrs. Roscoe had already set in motion. Recall his words. He was told to ensure I opened it myself. That implies an awareness of its significance beyond the errand. Maybe he peeked inside. Perhaps. But he also recognized danger. He sought refuge and attention. Bringing it to me was his only defense. I stared at him. You think Kendon knew the whole plot? I think he knew enough to die for it. Wolfe's eyes closed briefly. then reopened. Archie, bring me the trunk inventory list from the ledger case. I fetched the damp papers from the side table and spread them out. Wolfe ran a finger down the smudged columns. There, miscellaneous documents, item 14, correspondence of E. Vale. He looked up. The late Morton Vale's personal letters. Did you examine those? No, I was busy dodging bullets. Then we shall correct that oversight. The pages were still damp but legible. I unfolded the packet marked E. Vale, the edges stiff with age. Inside were 6 letters, neat script dated 2 years before Roscoe's death. Wolfe motioned for me to read aloud. My dear Mrs. Roscoe, I began, your husband's partner continues to disregard the recommendations regarding the storage of chemical compounds. The use of nitrate solutions near organic freight is... I trailed off. Technical stuff. He was warning her about safety. Continue, Wolfe said. The second letter changed tone. I must insist you cease experimenting with the formula. It was designed for controlled propagation only, not for exposure to open air. Your alterations may produce instability. I lowered the page. Sounds like she was trying to play scientist. She was playing something more dangerous, Wolfe murmured. Continue. The next letter was short. If you persist, you will endanger everyone. Destroy the remaining samples immediately. I cannot be responsible for the consequences. I looked up. Consequences, huh? You think this has to do with the acid compound that killed Kendon? He didn't answer, just reached for the letter, scanning it quickly. His eyes narrowed, then brightened with the satisfaction that usually precedes Kramer's next headache. Archie, prepare the car. I almost laughed. You? Going out again? The sky must be falling. Not yet, he said. But it may if my inference is correct. We are going to Mrs. Roscoe's residence. 10 minutes later, we were back in the night. The rain had thinned to mist, and the city smelled like cold metal and decisions. Wolfe sat in the back seat, brooding into the dark. I drove fast enough to keep up with his thoughts. Her townhouse was lit, though the rest of the street looked asleep. I rang. The maid answered, blinking when she saw Wolfe's silhouette behind me. Mr. Wolfe, she stammered. Madame retired. She will unretire, he said. Announce us. Mrs. Roscoe came down wrapped in a dressing gown the color of surrender. Mr. Wolfe. What? He cut her off. You conducted chemical experiments under Mr. Vale's supervision. You retained samples of his modified compound after his death. Her face went still. I didn't think it mattered. It mattered to Kendon. He discovered them while clearing freight materials from your late husband's accounts. You feared exposure. So you conceived a diversion, one that required my involvement to occupy Kramer while you retrieved the remaining samples. She shook her head violently. No, I told you the truth. Madam, Wolfe said softly, the truth you told was merely the most convenient one available at the time. You created a lethal mixture, accidentally perhaps, but lethal nonetheless. You could not destroy it safely, so you sought to disguise its theft as murder's residue. Unfortunately, Mr. Kendon died proving its potency. Her hands gripped the banister, knuckles white. You can't prove any of this. You mistake me for the police, he said. I have no interest in proof. Only comprehension. Her voice dropped. If I did what you say, it was a mistake. I never meant... I'm not your confessor, Wolfe said, turning away. The materials remain in your cellar, yes? You have not yet dared to dispose of them. Her lips parted, then closed again. That was answer enough. Archie, he said, inform Inspector Kramer that hazardous materials are to be collected from this address at once. Tell him their composition corresponds to the compound found on Kendon's body. She stepped forward, desperate now. Please, you'll ruin me. Wolfe paused at the door. Madam, ruin is rarely my concern. Prevention, occasionally. We left her standing there, one hand pressed against the wall as though it could hold her upright. In the car, Wolfe was silent until the streetlights thinned into grey. "You knew before we came," I said. "Not entirely. But the letters implied cause without closure. I required her reaction to confirm it. So this wasn't murder for profit. It was murder by chemistry. Accident weaponized by guilt," he corrected. "The most efficient combination of human flaws." We pulled up to the brownstone again, and I cut the engine. Wolfe didn't move. His voice, when it came, was low but steady. "Archie, note this for the record. A woman's attempt to atone often creates the very sin she wished to erase." "Poetic," I said. "You going to tell Kramer that too?" "He will hear it in his own way," Wolfe said. "And he will dislike it." We went inside. The warmth felt strange after the damp night. Fritz had left a tray waiting, sandwiches, beer, and a single napkin folded like a treaty. Wolfe sat, poured, and took a long, deliberate sip. I said, "So what do we file this one under? The Violet affair? The case of the widow who experimented?" He grunted. "File it under human vanity. It fits most cases." The rain started again outside, softer now, almost apologetic. Wolfe leaned back, closing his eyes. "You will prepare the transcript in the morning," he said. "For now, there is nothing left to pursue." "Except sleep," I said. He opened one eye. "An indulgence I leave to you." That was the end of the dialogue, and nearly the end of me. I turned off the lamp, leaving him in the half-dark with his beer and whatever thoughts keep men like him from rusting. Somewhere in the kitchen, Fritz's steps faded. The house settled into the kind of silence you only get when everyone's secrets have been dragged out and catalogued. I went upstairs knowing Wolfe would still be there when morning came, fat, immovable, and quietly victorious. Another night, another mystery, another Violet pressed flat under the weight of reason. Wolfe didn't speak the next morning until after Fritz had delivered the coffee and retreated like a diplomat who'd survived a revolution. He just stared at the folded newspaper on his lap, the headline half visible. "Chemist's widow cleared in freight murder mystery." I was perched at my desk, transcribing the report he dictated the night before, trying not to yawn audibly. The rain had finally moved east, leaving New York pale and tired, and the orchids in the plant rooms were getting all the fresh air the atmosphere could afford. He finally said, "The papers, as usual, prefer sensation over sequence." "Meaning they got your name wrong?" "They spelled it correctly. That is misfortune enough." I grinned. "Well, Kramer's quoted in full bloom. Says he appreciates your cooperation, despite unconventional methods. That's a new record for gratitude." "Kramer's idea of gratitude," Wolfe said, "is withholding irritation for one sentence." He folded the paper, set it aside, and leaned back, eyes half-lidded. "Archie, have you noted how every resolution merely disguises another beginning?" "Sure," I said, "especially around payday." "Phooey. I refer to human motive. Harris, Arlen, Mrs. Roscoe, each acted not from greed or revenge, but from preservation, and preservation, however noble, is the parent of deceit, which means you'll never be out of work." He didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he turned his chair slightly toward the window. "Fritz informs me Inspector Kramer telephoned an hour ago." "He did," I said. "He wants to come by." "Did he specify why?" "No, but if I were guessing, I'd say it isn't to compliment your orchids." Wolfe sighed, the sound that usually precedes civilization's decline. "Very well. When he arrives, you will contain him with beer and civility. You expect him to behave?" "I expect nothing so improbable, but we shall indulge him." At 11:10, the bell rang. I opened the door to Kramer in full storm gear, cigar clamped, mood darker than the clouds had been. He stomped into the office like a man searching for justification to yell. "Morning, Inspector," I said. "You're early for lunch." "Cut it, Goodwin. Wolfe, I've got one more question about your widow. Wolfe regarded him as if considering whether conversation constituted self-harm. Indeed. Kramer dropped his hat on the stand and sat without being asked. The lab boys turned up something new in that cellar. Broken glass, scorched concrete. They think she didn't stop experimenting after Vale died. Whatever she brewed, it wasn't fertilizer. It's military-grade corrosive compound. I want to know if you were aware of that. I was, Wolfe said. Kramer blinked. You were? Of course. Her correspondence with Vale made that abundantly clear. Then why didn't you tell me? Wolfe's eyes closed briefly, as if mourning the death of subtlety. Inspector, I told you enough to remove the immediate danger. I withheld the rest because I feared you might turn an accident into a scandal. Kramer barked a laugh. You mean you wanted the story for yourself? I detest stories, Wolfe said evenly. I prefer conclusions. Kramer leaned forward. Well, I'm not done concluding. Harris claims Mrs. Roscoe offered him $10,000 to retrieve the trunk before anyone else could open it. He says she wanted the rest of Vale's formula. She did not, Wolfe said. She wanted to destroy it. Harris lied because lies are currency among thieves. Kramer puffed once, eyes narrowing. You're protecting her. I'm protecting the truth from contamination, a compound more volatile than any in her cellar. I said, Inspector, she's a widow with remorse, not a crime ring. You already got your headline. Maybe I'm not finished, he said. If she was working on something dangerous, it's federal, not local. There'll be inquiries. Wolfe grimaced. Then let them inquire. The Bureau of Chemical Safety may amuse itself with her garden pots. Kramer snorted, stood, and jammed his cigar between his teeth. One of these days, Wolfe, you'll overplay that smug patience of yours. When you do, I'll be waiting. Then you shall have a long and uneventful wait, Wolfe said. Kramer left, slamming the door hard enough to make the beer bottles clink. I watched the glass vibrate back into stillness. You know, you could make a living selling composure to politicians. Archie, he said, the secret of composure is disinterest. Sure, but disinterest doesn't call the cops to confiscate chemicals. He grunted. Pragmatism is not interest. Now call Mrs. Roscoe. I would prefer to hear whether she intends to remain in New York or retreat to obscurity. I phoned her number. The maid answered, voice trembling. Mrs. Roscoe is not available, Mr. Goodwin. There was an incident. What kind of incident? She's gone. Her luggage is missing. The police came earlier. Then she vanished. I froze. When? An hour ago. I hung up and turned to Wolfe. She's disappeared. He didn't flinch, just said, Of course. Of course. That doesn't sound like surprise. She's cornered by guilt and scrutiny. Her instinct is flight. Unfortunately, instinct rarely improves judgment. Meaning she's running straight into trouble. Precisely. Fetch your coat. 10 minutes later, we were in the sedan again, Wolfe a grim monument in the back seat, the city brightening into uneasy daylight. I called Saul Panzer from a payphone en route, told him to check the train stations. We started at Grand Central. The crowds moved like tides. Businessmen, tourists, commuters, all smelling faintly of coffee and hurry. I didn't expect to find her easily, but then Luck and I have a complicated relationship. At track 23, a flash of blue caught my eye. A traveling suit, modest and expensive, the color she'd worn yesterday. She was standing near the gate, ticket in hand, eyes darting toward every movement. I moved fast, caught her elbow before she could step forward. Mrs. Roscoe, she stiffened. Mr. Goodwin, please let me go. Not this time. Her eyes filled, not with tears, but exhaustion. You don't understand. They'll destroy me. They'll make me sound like a monster. Lady, I said, you don't need help sounding human, but running makes you guilty of something even if you aren't. Behind us, Wolfe's voice came, low and steady. He had followed, somehow managing not to look ridiculous even surrounded by commuters. "Mrs. Roscoe, your attempt at flight was futile. Inspector Kramer has already assumed you have fled to avoid prosecution. He will make that assumption permanent unless you return voluntarily." She turned, trembling. "You mean surrender myself?" "I mean restore coherence. If you flee, your motives die with you. If you stay, you may at least dictate your epitaph." For a moment, the crowd blurred around us. Feet thudding, announcements echoing, steam curling from the train vents. Then she dropped the ticket. It fluttered down like an afterthought. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll come back." Wolfe inclined his head. Wise. Not noble, but wise. Back in the car, she sat silent beside me, hands locked in her lap. Wolfe's eyes remained closed, but I could feel the pressure of thought radiating from him. When we reached the brownstone, Fritz opened the door as though expecting casualties. Inside, she sank into the red chair, face pale. Wolfe lowered himself opposite her. "You will tell Inspector Kramer the full truth. You did not intend harm. That is sufficient. Do not attempt further concealment. Honesty now is economy later." She nodded faintly. "And after?" "After," Wolfe said, "you will leave New York quietly, somewhere where flowers are merely flowers, not weapons or metaphors." She tried to smile but didn't succeed. "You sound like you almost pity me." He looked at her, expression unreadable. "Madam, pity is for those who have not acted. You have." The doorbell rang again. I went to answer it. Kramer stood there, coat dripping, cigar out. His eyes went straight past me to the office. "You found her." "She found herself," I said. He brushed past, glancing from Wolfe to the woman. "You ready to talk, Mrs. Roscoe?" She nodded. "Yes, Inspector." Kramer took out his notebook, his tone suddenly gentler. "Then let's do it right this time." Wolfe watched as she spoke. Quietly, clearly, unflinchingly. Each word tightened the net, but loosened the weight in the room. When she finished, Kramer shut the notebook and looked at Wolfe. "You know, for once, I can't say I mind your interference." "That is praise enough, Inspector," Wolfe said. Kramer left with her, and the brownstone sank into silence again. Wolfe leaned back, eyes closing, the ghost of fatigue crossing his face. I said, "That it?" "Yes," he murmured. "The case has concluded." "And the violet?" "Gone," he said, "but its scent remains." The door had barely shut behind Kramer and Mrs. Roscoe before Wolfe reached for his beer, opened it with a calm that only comes from victory or indigestion, and said, "Archie, observe the folly of remorse. It never concludes gracefully." I slumped into my chair. Remorse or police reports? Both. They share the same flaw, excess detail after the essential fact is established. I leaned back, watching him study the amber surface like it contained a postscript. "You realize you just wrapped a case involving blackmail, fraud, murder, and experimental acid, and you're complaining about a detail." "Facts are tolerable," he said. "Motives are tedious. Humanity's insistence on explaining itself is what makes civilization noisy." "Sure," I said. "And yet without all that noise, you'd have no reason to bill clients." He ignored me, as expected. Fritz entered, quiet as steam, and set a small tray beside Wolfe's elbow, beer, cheese, and a stack of envelopes that had arrived with the morning mail. Wolfe gave them the same look he reserves for telegrams announcing the end of the world. "Archie," he said, "see who believes I require their correspondence." I slit open the first one. A thank-you note from a law firm in Philadelphia Wolfe had advised years ago. The second was a restaurant invitation. The third an inquiry from House and Garden about his legendary orchids. I couldn't resist. "You're becoming a celebrity botanist. Shall I schedule your radio appearance? He made a sound between a grunt and a sigh. Phooey. Then I hit the fourth envelope. Plain, cream stock, no return address. The handwriting was narrow and deliberate. I slid the letter out and read aloud. Mr. Wolfe, you misunderstand remorse. It can conclude elegantly if one knows where to place the final punctuation. There was no signature. I lowered the page slowly. You getting fan mail from philosophers now? Wolfe's eyes opened fully. Let me see that. I handed it over. He turned it in his fingers, sniffed the paper, studied the ink. Imported stationery. German, high-grade cotton blend. Ink from a fountain pen, not commercial cartridge. So our author's educated, discreet and possibly homicidal. What's new? The tone, he said. It mimics my own. That's flattering. It's infuriating. Parody is the cheapest form of insult. I glanced at the envelope again. The postmark was Manhattan, yesterday afternoon. Maybe Mrs. Roscoe wrote it before turning herself in. Unlikely. She lacked that much composure. He passed the letter back. Archie, the phrasing, final punctuation. That is not metaphorical. It is warning. I stood, uneasy without knowing why. Warning for what? The case is done. Perhaps for us. I stared. You think someone's still playing? He didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the letter again, the way a mathematician stares at a wrong equation. Archie, find out whether the envelope bears residue, powder, trace, anything foreign. You think it's poisoned? Unlikely, but certainty is preferable to conjecture. Use gloves. I fetched a magnifier and did a quick check. Clean except for faint grey smudges near the flap. Probably printer's dust. Or deliberate masking. No, this is not random. Someone orchestrated the timing. The letter was mailed before Mrs. Roscoe's confession, yet it references remorse, concluding elegantly. That presupposes knowledge of her intentions. Meaning someone still had eyes on her. Meaning someone was inside her household, or ours. The word ours landed with weight. I felt my stomach tighten. You're not saying Fritz. Fritz is incapable of subterfuge, but others have entered our threshold these past days. Kramer, Saul, Mrs. Roscoe, Harris before his arrest, the lab assistants. Access breeds opportunity. I said, all right, suppose someone's toying with you. What's the play? A poisoned letter? A cryptic line? That's hardly fireworks. He leaned back, eyes closing again. No, Archie. It's prelude. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was sharp, like the pause before a conductor raises his baton. I broke it first. You want me to have Saul check post offices? Yes, and Ori. Divide the city into quadrants. Whoever mailed this knows our pattern of inquiry. They must have observed you delivering reports to Kramer or Saul at the precinct. I phoned Saul first. He answered on the first ring as usual. Panzer. Saul, I've got a new errand. Trace a letter mailed yesterday afternoon, postmarked Manhattan. I'll send a scan. Wolfe thinks our admirer's back for an encore. His tone sharpened. You want quiet. Quiet and quick. I'll call in 2 hours. When I hung up, Wolfe said, Good. Now attend to Mrs. Roscoe. The Times reports her bail hearing was scheduled this morning. If she has vanished again, the pattern confirms itself. I picked up the phone, dialed the courthouse clerk. It took some persuasion, but a familiar voice finally said, she never appeared. Her attorney claims illness, but the police can't locate her. I repeated that aloud. Wolfe's eyes opened, slow and deliberate. So, the punctuation begins. You think the letter came from her? No, from the one who taught her punctuation. Before I could ask what that meant, the bell rang. Once, then again, sharp, impatient. Fritz called from the hall. Mr. Wolfe, a man insists on seeing you. He will not give his name. Describe him. Tall, dark coat, carrying a package. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. "Archie, your revolver." I slid it out of the drawer, keeping it low as Fritz ushered the visitor in. The man stepped into the office with the calm of someone rehearsed. Late 40s, grey at the temples, skin like polished parchment. He held a small box under one arm, wrapped in brown paper. "Mr. Wolfe," he said pleasantly, "I believe you received my note." I said, "You've got lousy timing and worse taste in stationery." He smiled faintly. "Mr. Goodwin, I presume. How efficient of you both." Wolfe's tone stayed mild. "State your purpose." "I wanted to deliver the coda." He placed the box on the desk, unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a glass vial, sealed and half-filled with cloudy fluid. The liquid glimmered faintly under the light. Wolfe's brows drew together. "Vale's compound." "Precisely," the man said. "A recreation to honor a mutual acquaintance. I thought you'd appreciate the craftsmanship." "Who are you?" I said. He smiled again. "A student, once of Vale's, briefly of yours, though you didn't know it. I attended your lecture on botanical catalysis 3 years ago. I was inspired." Wolfe's tone sharpened. "You are deranged." "Only methodically," he replied. "Mrs. Roscoe was never your client. She was my experiment. I supplied her the variant compound, encouraged her to test it. When she faltered, I arranged your involvement. You were the control variable." I raised the revolver. "That's enough science for today." He ignored me. The letter, of course, was genuine. Final punctuation, elegance achieved through conclusion. She understood it, I think. Even now, she fulfills it. Wolfe said, "What have you done?" The man's smile widened. "You will read tomorrow's paper." Then he turned, quick as breath, and before I could cross the distance, smashed the vial against the floor. Glass burst, vapor hissed, acrid and white. I grabbed my sleeve to cover my mouth, lunged forward, but the man was already out the door, disappearing into the hall. Fritz shouted, coughing. I got to the window in time to see him vanish into a cab. The street swallowed him like water. Behind me, Wolfe sat perfectly still, eyes narrowed against the smoke. "Archie, open the window." "Ventilation." I did, coughing hard. The smell stung my throat, sharp as bleach and metal. When the air cleared, Wolfe examined the residue on the floor with a penknife. "Non-lethal," he said. "Merely demonstrative." I wiped my sleeve across my face. "Great. So we've got a homicidal chemist with a flair for poetry." "Worse," Wolfe said. "We have intellect without restraint, the rarest and most lethal combination." I looked out at the street again, the cab already gone. "You think he'll come back?" "He doesn't need to," Wolfe murmured. "He's already written his next sentence." I hit the window latch and shoved it open wider until the last curls of vapor slipped out into the afternoon air. Wolfe hadn't moved from his chair, but his fingers were poised on the armrest, twitching once. His version of high tension. The floor glistened with the residue of the shattered vial, a film of pale dust that shimmered faintly where sunlight touched it. "Archie," he said, low and controlled. "Close the door. I will not have Fritz inhaling that." I did, then crossed to him. "We've got a lunatic with chemistry credentials and a head full of Vale's ghost." He practically announced he's got another trick coming. Wolfe's eyes, half closed, glinted under the shade. He already delivered it. The vial? That was just smoke and manners. No. His voice flattened. The substance on that floor is harmless alone. But he did not come to poison us. He came to mock us. Mock us? Yes. The vapor carried microscopic traces of his compound, identical to that which killed Kendon. By tomorrow morning, it will be discovered on our carpets, on our clothes, on Fritz's broom. Kramer will arrive to confirm that Wolfe and Goodwin were in possession of the same chemical responsible for 2 deaths. It is a final punctuation, precisely as promised. I stared. So he frames us, then vanishes into the city with a headline ready to print. Neat. Neatness is his vice, Wolfe said grimly. And his error. He stood, a movement so abrupt it shocked the air itself. Archie, telephone Inspector Kramer. Tell him to come at once, but do not mention the chemist. Merely say I have concluded a matter requiring his immediate presence. I went to the phone, dialed, and kept it steady despite the pulse in my wrist. Inspector, Wolfe says drop whatever you're doing and bring a warrant form. He's got a gift for you. Kramer's growl vibrated through the line. If this is another stunt, it's bigger than a stunt. You'll want it wrapped before the morning papers do. When I hung up, Wolfe was already bent over the residue with a jeweler's loop, his bulk balanced like a boulder over a crystal. Archie, fetch the violet log from the greenhouse and the pair of gloves Mrs. Roscoe wore during her confession. I brought both. He spread them beside the dust and began matching specks with surgical precision. I watched, silently wishing I'd chosen a quieter career, like lion taming. 10 minutes later, he grunted. Quiet triumph. Observe, the compound's trace coloration, slightly off-white in the letter dust, pure silver here. That variance indicates separate batches. Our chemist's ego demanded perfection, but he altered the mixture for each demonstration. The earlier batch lacked stabilizer. It would have degraded by now. Only the most recent remains active. Meaning we can prove the dust was planted today. Exactly. The timeline collapses his design. Kramer will arrive shortly. Meanwhile, we shall prepare his education. The bell rang 20 minutes later, sharpened twice. Kramer entered without waiting, followed by 2 detectives. He looked winded and irritable. All right, Wolfe. This better not be another philosophical lecture. What's the emergency? Wolfe gestured toward the floor. That. Kramer frowned down at the scattered residue. Dust. Evidence, Wolfe said, from the man who murdered Kendon and manipulated every subsequent event. He visited an hour ago under pretext of returning property. You may confirm his presence with Fritz. Fritz nodded from the doorway. Yes, Inspector. Tall man, grey hair, carrying a parcel. Kramer turned back. You let him in? Briefly. He was persuasive. Name? Wolfe's tone sharpened. Morton Vale's protégé. He called himself a student. He is, in essence, the author of this entire affair. And he intends, even now, to transfer guilt to me. Kramer's eyes narrowed. You're saying this guy set you up with a chemical trace? Yes. Fortunately, he overestimated his own finesse. I've preserved enough of the compound to prove its instability and the variation between batches. My evidence will show this residue could only have been synthesized within the past 48 hours. The murderer's own perfection will condemn him. Kramer looked skeptical, then intrigued. You can prove that. I can demonstrate it. Archie. I handed him the sealed packet Wolfe had labeled with the earlier sample, scraped from Kendon's car by the lab weeks ago. Wolfe placed it beside the fresh dust and gestured to the faint difference in hue. You see, the original compound, older, darker, oxidized. This new residue remains luminous. The murderer's arrogance forced him to refine the formula, an artist altering his signature. That mistake will hang him. Kramer bent closer, grunted. Looks the same to me. Then your eyesight betrays you, but your chemists will not. Have them test it immediately, and while they do, circulate a description of the visitor to every precinct and ferry terminal. He will attempt to leave the city within hours. Kramer straightened, the cigar twitching in his teeth. You better be right, Wolfe, if this is another one of your mind puzzles. It is not a puzzle, Inspector. It is punctuation. He left in a hurry, barking orders to his men. When the door shut, Wolfe lowered himself back into the chair, eyes half-lidded again. Now we wait. You think they'll catch him? I asked. They will not need to. He turned the letter over once more, tapping it gently. Our adversary's flaw is aesthetic pride. He will seek a finale worthy of his intellect, and that requires an audience. You think he'll come back here? I think he already intends to. I kept the revolver within reach and pretended to read, but my mind followed the same rhythm as the clock's tick. The hours stretched, evening slipping toward dusk. The phone rang just before 6. Kramer's voice came through, tight with static and triumph. "We got him, caught at the ferry to Staten Island, suitcase full of lab junk and a written confession addressed to you. Said you'd appreciate the punctuation. We'll book him for Kendon and attempted homicide. And Wolfe—" "Yes, Inspector." "You were right again. Damn you." The line went dead. I turned to Wolfe, who was already leaning back, eyes closed. "You knew he'd take the ferry." "I knew he required water," Wolfe murmured. The man's metaphors were aquatic. Cleansing, dissolution, reflection. He would seek symmetry. That's poetic. That's evidence. Poetry is simply logic wearing cologne. I couldn't help smiling. "So that's it, huh? The curtain really drops this time?" He nodded. "At last. And Archie, dispose of that letter. Burn it." I glanced at the elegant handwriting one last time before striking a match. The flame licked up, curling the edges until the words vanished in smoke. Wolfe watched, impassive. "Now," he said, "pour me a beer. This case was intolerably protracted." "Sure," I said, bringing it to him, "and I'll file the report under Botanical Maniacs Anonymous." He took the glass, studying the bubbles with something almost like contentment. "Archie, you will note for the record that the murderer's fatal error was not arrogance, but admiration. He sought to impress me. It is the most foolish motive imaginable." "Flattery gets you framed," I said. He gave a thin smile. "Indeed, humanity's devotion to vanity is endless fertilizer. It ensures my occupation." He raised the glass, drank, and set it down with finality. The sound echoed through the room, clean and absolute. I wrote the last line of the report, capped the pen, and leaned back. "Case closed," I said. "Properly punctuated?" he replied.